Good evening, humans. Tonight I have a scary urban legend from France based on true events. Here is the story. The Vanishing Room. The first lie was the wallpaper. It curled at the edges in a way that looked deliberate, as if it had been taught exactly how to soften a stranger's eyes. The gold vines and small painted blossoms were from another century, a pattern chosen to make a lobby feel like something safe. It worked on me the night we arrived. After 14 hours of travel, rain slanting in mean little lines, the smell of diesel and wet stone, the Hotel St. Denis glowed as if it alone had remembered how to be warm. 2 nights, I told the clerk, my mother is unwell. He barely looked at me just as at the passport, then at my mother's face over my shoulder, but of course, his accent turned the sentence into a curtain. You will have the quiet floor. We have been traveling through Europe the way people do when they're trying to curtain. We have been traveling through Europe the way people do when they are trying to outrun the parts of their lives that still reach them in sleep. My mother called it the victory lap. I call it something else. Silently anything but last. She had beaten the thing growing in her once already. The new ache behind her eyes was just a headache from the flight, she insisted. The humid heaviness of the city's air, she said the word headache like a charm. She pressed my hand when she thought I wasn't looking and smiled too wide. The elevator was older than gravity. It climbed with theatrical slowness. The iron gate shivered on its tracks. The 5th floor was quieter the way certain churches are quieter, soundless in a way that suggests listening. Our room was at the end of the corridor, the last door on the left, the black lacquer number 512. The key was actual metal, not a card, and when I turned it, the lock gave with an expensive murmur. The room was all soft fatigued, tall windows with heavy drapes, a bed with too many pillows, and then a smaller bed for me near the radiator that clicked like teeth when the pipe woke. The air smelled of beeswax and old bouquets. On the dresser, a bowl of pears watched their own ripening in a mirror. See, my mother said, not cursed, not haunted, not a mistake. You jinxed it, I said. You always jinx things by claiming they aren't haunted. She laughed and winced, a hand going to her temple as if someone had plucked a string there. The laugh hung for a second longer, than it should have, and then fell. A trick a comedian uses when he wants the room to be honest. I fine, she said, just a flight. She was not fine. The color had slid out of her lips. I touched her forehead, and she was both too hot and too cold. The particular paradox of fevers. I'll get aspirin, I said, or something stronger. The concierge, she said, they always have a little drawer of miracles. The concierge, a different man with the same politely veiled expression, nodded. One moment, he said, and vanished behind the desk. He returned with a carton the size of a jewelry box, tablets, a bottle of something brown and herbal, a note in flowing cursive, drink hot, sleep deep. The script had a flourish on the P of deep that made it look like a hook. Thank you, I said, and a kettle. But of course, I brewed the tea in the room, the steam leaving damp circles on the window. My mother sipped and made a face. It tastes like forest, she said. She lay back, shoes still on, one arm across her eyes. Wake me in 20 minutes. I watched her mouth relax, then drop open. Sleep went over her like water. I turned off the lamp. The rain began again with such determination it felt personal. Exhaustion hit me with the full hollowness of jet lag. The body clock taken apart and put back together wrong. I sat on the little bed and unlaced my shoes. Somewhere on the floor below a door slammed, and a moment later footfalls climbed the stairs in a rhythm that sounded like someone counting backwards. I dozed, woke, stood to tuck the coverlet around my mother, and realized the room had changed. It took a minute to understand how everything was where it had been, and yet not. The table had turned a quarter inch. The curtain, tied back, had become a different knot. The pears were gone from the bowl. In their place lay a pair of keys on a ribbon. I told myself I was the one who had moved the table. The housekeeper had taken the pears, but the air felt freshly breathed by someone else. My mother slept without moving, one hand half curled on the duvet like a figure placed on a tomb in white marble. I bent to kiss her forehead. The heat had climbed. I'm going down, I whispered. I'll ask about a doctor. The concierge desk was empty. The lobby had shifted under the light the way certain faces shift under certain words. 4 men in dark suits sat quiet and coiled. A woman in a red dress walked past me on the tiled floor. It left no sound, as if her shoes had chosen to be respectful. When the concierge returned, his smile was the kind that is used to smooth hard questions. My mother is worse, I said. Is there a clinic? A doctor who can come? Of course, he said. The course had frayed edges. His hand slid beneath the counter. I will call. He did not call. He lowered his gaze to a ledger. He had no reason to write in and made a note. A moment only, he said. Where are you staying? Room 512. He nodded as if weighing a wine. Then his forehead furrowed. A polite performance of confusion that widened, becoming something else, and became a wall. Room 512, he said, and tried the number as if it might be a joke. Are you sure? Yes, I said, last door on the left. We do not have 512, he said gently. The 5th floor ends in 510. There are phrases that tilt the floor under you a few degrees, a baby's name in the mouth of a stranger, a doctor saying we need to talk, a banker asking for your mother's maiden name and then saying the account is gone. This was like that. The world didn't fall, it just nudged enough. You gave me the key, I said, holding it out like a talisman that could repel nonsense. We've been in it for... I looked at the clock above the desk and lost my sentence. Time had jumped. It was later than it should have been. I could feel the missing hour, like a tooth with space around it. He glanced at the key and blinked. Ah, he said, relief flooding his face in a way that made me feel angrier. That is an order key for storage, housekeeping. You must be confused after your travel. My mother is upstairs, I said, low and steady in the way you become when rage wants to scatter you. In the bed, she is ill. If you don't call a doctor, I'll call an ambulance. Who is your mother, he asked. I told him. I showed him her passport. He studied the photo, then my face, and then the calculation, and his eyes shifted from condescension to caution. One moment, he said, and turned to speak in rapid French to the men in suits. They rose as if the sentence had pulled strings in their backs. This is absurd, I said. My voice shook. I'll get her myself. The elevator door opened before I pressed the button, as if I summoned by someone else. The men didn't get in. They watched the door close on me the way you watch a child step onto the thin ice of a frozen pond. The corridor on 5 had grown narrower. Carpet runner had changed to a color that made my stomach feel low, sickly blue with a barely visible pattern of interlocking rings. The sconces were lit, though no switch had been flipped, and their flames were the wrong shade, not electric yellow, but something that remembered gaslight. I walked to the end and found a wall where my mother's door had been, plaster, seamless, the wainscoting continuous, the number 510 before it, and 511, nowhere at all. I stood with my palms flat against the paint and wood and felt nothing but the cold consideration of the materials. I pressed my ear to the wall and heard nothing, not even the small animal sounds of a building at rest. The lion in my chest reared without a name and bellowed. I ran my hand along the baseboard, looking for a seam, for the betrayal of a hidden door, and found the faintest wavering in the paint, a hairline that ran shoulder high from corner to corner, and then stopped. The joinery was so perfect the eye would never find it with the fingertips knew. I dug for my key and found it gone. Hey, I said to nothing, the worst word to use on forces that do not care to be addressed. Hey, open! A woman's voice behind me said, Madam. I turned too fast. A housekeeper stood by her trolley, a bundle of sun with a scarf knotted tight at her neck. Her eyes were dark that remembered fields. Do you need? She began, and then saw my face. Ah, she said softly as I, recognizing something that had happened before. My mother, I said, and felt the word hit something hollow in my mouth. She's in the room at the end. There was a number, 512, they say, I swallowed. They say there isn't one. None, she said, not to me, but to the air between us, as if answering whatever listened, then louder to me, Come. She rolled the trolley to the end and parked it as if hiding the scene, then leaned into the corner and pressed the heel of her hand against a section of wainscoting, not wider than a hook. The air sighed, a panel slipped and clicked, and the wallpaper shivered. The door was there, if door is the word for a bite taken out of reality. The seam ran all at once where my fingers had found. The woman pressed her palm flat. The panel shuddered and resisted and then gave. The room beyond was not ours. It was ours the way a photograph is in your face and not your face. The drapes were there but a different cloth, the bed but lower, the pairs but gone too far. The scent was old water, and the radiators and lilies left too long in stillness. Madame, I called, too careful as if the word might slice. Something moved, not my mother. A concierge stood by the window, his smile folded away in his pocket, his hands in rubber gloves. The men in suits were there too, two of them wearing the kind of stillness that suggests a command you cannot hear. I ran to the bed. The sheets were cold. The pillows had been beaten back to the original arrogance. No imprint of a head. No errant hair. The housekeeper closed the door behind us. She did it gently, like you lay a hand on a frightened animal so it doesn't bolt. Where is she? I demanded. The concierge did not answer. He looked at the housekeeper as if her presence had changed the math. Where is my mother? I said. I could hear the part of myself that was a child in the store aisle screaming for a parent. I hated that part and could not stop it. You saw us. You checked us in. You gave us the key. I gave you a key, he said. His voice seemed to come from a floor lower than this one. I am very sorry for your confusion. The men came a half-step forward, palms open in invention, an invitation to calm, a warning to quiet my body if I wanted my body to stay mine. Listen to me, I said to the housekeeper, who watched not me but the air above my shoulder. You saw me in the hall. You saw the door. Tell him. Tell them. Madam, she said, eyes wavering. You must come with me now. She moved with the compact ease of someone who has lived in corridors. I followed because I had no other movement left. She opened the door. The concierge did not stop us. His face had become the face of someone who has decided to let a storm pass over and count survivors later. We ran down the hall past 510, past the elevator, down the back stair, the housekeeper's keys and muted rain in her fist. We went through a service door with a sign that said, Privy, and into a stairs not for guests. Concrete, iron, air that hadn't circulated since the house was built. At the bottom, another door. She pushed through with her shoulder, and we were in a space that was almost a room. Low, brick, pipes like ribs along the ceiling, one bulb hissing and swelling. She opened a locker and pulled out a cardboard box tied with twine. She pressed it into my hand. She will be fine, she said, but not now. What does that mean? I said. Her eyes flipped toward the ceiling, toward the geometry of rooms above us. There are nights, she said, and her voice had the flinty certainty of someone who has lived under a volcano too long, when the hotel keeps what comes into it. Not always, not everyone, only the ones it thinks it can keep without trouble. Her mouth twitched. The old ones? The ones traveling alone, the ones who sleep too deep. It is hungry in the walls. It eats times first. You're insane, I said. I'm calling the police. You can call anyone you like, she said. They will come. They will look. They will find a record of you and your mother checking into a different hotel, or arriving tomorrow, or not at all. The St. Denis does this. The city allows it. It has done so since she just retired. Since time. You expect me to believe, she set her hand on the box in mine. The twine left a mark on her fingers. Do you know the word suture? She asked. The seam closes a wound. The hotel sutures itself around its choices. It closes, it heals, it forgets in front of you, but it does not forget at all. Then where is she? I whispered. In there, she said, and tapped the brick. The sound carried not as sound, but as pressure. Not dead yet. Not alive the way you mean either. They will make her a story. They can call the next time someone asks why there is no 512. They will say there has never been a 512. They will roll their eyes in the way they are trained to do. I took out my phone with hands that would not obey me. There was no signal. The black mirror looked back. My face was too bright in the dark. What is in the box? I said. Proof, she said, for when the hotel takes your memory of tonight, and you need a new one. For when you must decide to leave or to stay until the seam opens again. Open it, I said, because I needed something in my hands that was not water. She shook her head. Not here. We listened. The building made the small conversational noise of a place awake at 3 a.m. The settling, the sighing, the thin, curious taps. In the pause between those noises, something else moved. A long, slow scrape, like a chair being dragged across the ballroom floor, a floor above your life. How do I get her back? I asked. The seam will open again, she said. The hotel takes in dusk and gives out dawn. Or the other way. You must be waiting when it exhales. You must be fast. How do you know? I asked. Have you done this before? She didn't answer. She took my wrist and led me back up. Not to the 5th floor, but to 4. A room key appeared from her pocket like a coin from a magician's sleeve. The room was a twin of ours, or of anyone's. Bed, drapes, bowl of fruit ripened to the exact point of apology. Wait here, she said. Do not sleep. She left me with the box. I set it on the bed and did not touch the twine. The clock on the mantel ticked, the wrong seconds in wrong order. I paced. I pressed my ear to the floor, then to the wall. Everything in me shouted lie, and everything else in me whispered, listen. The city outside, the window exhaled into the boulevards. A train entered the tunnel under the river, and the room's bones hummed. At some point, I opened the box because the mind cannot sit beside a closed box. Inside was a book bound in a cracking leather, damp along the edges with old water. The hotel ledger, names written in copper plate ink. Dates 1898, 1902, 1919, next to some names, a neat mark like a thorn. I flicked. I found a page labeled today by a hand, not mine. There my name and my mother's, script in a pen that had not been used for decades. A thorn beside my mother's name in the margin. The concierge tidy shame, transit. I had to see the door again. I left the room in the box and went the back stair. The hallway was thinner now, as if the building had drawn itself in. The housekeeper's trolley was gone. The scene was not. I pressed my ear to it and for the first time heard my mother's voice. Not words, breath, then a syllable in the middle of my name. A syllable that is only pain. Move, I said to the wall, to the thing alive inside of it. Open. Nothing opens for pleas. Things open for leverage. The wainscot had nails polished by a century of polishing. I slid my fingers under the lip and pulled. Wood groaned, paint cracked like old snow. A strip came away under my hands. Small and worthless, I pulled again. Something on the other side pulled back. Then the door slipped as if the house board had decided to humor a child. The panel widened, a smell came out, old cloth, lilies, sleep, and then a current, a pressure difference. The way train tunnels breathe when a car enters. The room beyond was not my room or the concierge's room. It was a corridor of doors, shut, each with numbers that belonged to no order. The lights above them were bulbs pale with no source. I stepped through and felt time spill forward and back over the threshold the way a tide tugs a swimmer. Mom, I said, and the word fell without echo. I tried the first door, locked. The second, locked. The third opened and the room inside was mine. At 6 years old, the bed with the unicorn coverlet, the crooked poster of the solar system, the window that rattled in winter. I saw myself in the mirror and did not. A shape crossed the floor behind me and I turned and found only the space where a child had been a moment ago. Mom, I called louder because fear had learned my throat. Another door inside a room that could not be remembered. Someone else's wedding night. The dress laid neatly on a chair. A men's cufflinks blinking the same. Small, intelligent eyes on the nightstand. Another door. A hospital room from 1931. The metal bed painted mint. The metal bed painted mint. A window opening. A city that had not been built yet. Another door. An attic with photographs tacked to the walls, and in every photograph the same face with the eyes cut out. I knew then that I could spend the rest of my life opening doors. There are worlds. There are only hinges. I keep going. Where are you? I asked the wrong question to the wrong air, and the right answer came anyway. A long breath, wet and urgent, the sound of fever turning. The door at the very end of the corridor had no number, and a smear of something dark around the knob, as if a hand had been erased. There more than once. I tried it, locked. I put my shoulder to it. It gave an inch and then remembered its duty. Please, I said. And then, because please is a word for people, not for rooms, I invoked her name, loud and whole, the way she had shouted mine across parking lots and playgrounds, and once when I wandered too far in a museum and turned to see no one I knew. Her name pushed the door open. The room beyond had a single bed with a floral spread, a low chair, a window that showed only stone. My mother lay on the bed the way someone lies when she is trying not to frighten a child, watching her. Her eyes had the too bright glass over fever. In the corner stood the concierge, hands folded, a sorrow he could take off and put on. Again hanging around his neck, the two men by the wall looked as if they were deciding whether to make the next hour harder. She is resting, the concierge said. She is leaving, I said. He sighed. Because I had forced him to be real. Many guests rest here, he said. They do not all leave. Then some do, I said. Open the way. Even if I wanted to, he said, and almost smiled. Tired of the lie that required stamina to maintain. The hotel opens and closes when it pleases. It will not open for you. It will, I said, and I did not know if I spoke from faith or fury. It will because I am not leaving without her. My mother watched me with a very specific look of a person who, despite her entire history of being braver than she had any reason to be, is afraid for you, not for herself. You always were stubborn, she whispered. You taught me, I said. The concierge glanced at the men. They did not move. He looked at my mother, then at me, then at the place beyond me where the hall unschools. You will bring others, he said. Police, reporters, men who like to break things. We will have to change again. It is an effort, his voice softened. You can forget, he said. We could help you forget. Sleep, and when you wake, there will be another key in your hand and another story in your mouth. You think you can take her because she is tired, I said. Because I look like someone you can teach to doubt herself. You can only keep what we leave behind. I am not leaving anything. We are not thieves, he said, offended, and I thought perhaps he even believed it. We are caretakers of what the city gives us. Nothing disappears, it is curated. Behind him the wall breathed, the seam in the baseboard fluttered like the throat of something sleeping. I went to my mother and then the men held their ground, decoding their instructions. From the room itself, I slid my arm under her shoulders. She was too hot, too light. Can you stand, I asked. For you, she said, always. The corridor outside the door had lengthened, the way a cord grows extra letters when you stare at it too long. I did not care. I pointed some of my body towards the seam the housekeeper had revealed and walked that way with my mother's weight, a sentence across my arms. The concierge did not follow. He knew the hotel would do the work he did not want to do. The doors that had opened did not now. The floor tilted and untilted like a boat. The lights went low and then high, a pulse that made the walls look thin. Talk, I said to my mother, because voice, tethered body. Tell me something. I once stole an apricot, she said, from my aunt's tree. I lied about it for 40 years. Criminal, I said. I once loved a man who slept like a cat, she said. Left him because he would have left first. The corridor yawned. I kept us moving. The smell of lilies came again, not the sweet church version, but the rot under the sweet. The seam at the end glimmered like a horizon. When we reached it, the panel did not open. Of course it did not. The hotel is a thing that keeps. I pressed my palm where the housekeeper had pressed hers. I felt nothing. My mother's breath guttered. The ledger's twine bit my ribs through my coat where I had tucked the book without knowing I had. I slammed the spine against the seam. Paper cracked. Ink dust rose. The hotel stilled, recognizing an artifact with its own name scratched in it. Open, I said, and this time it did. We spilled through into a hallway that remembered being a hallway. Scones, carpet runner with honest pattern, a window that showed wet night. My mother made a sound like the end of a word. We did not take the elevator, we took the stairs. The concierge did not appear at the landing. The lobby breathed as if it had been holding a note and had finally been allowed to exhale. The wallpaper vines no longer curled, they clung. I said to the concierge's empty chair, you keep what is abandoned. There is a difference between that and left. Learn it. The front doors gave us back to the street. The rain had stopped. A car hissed past, tires writing a line of punctuation on wet stone. I have carried my mother across the boulevard. The clinic 2 blocks down had a red cross that did not blink. Inside, a woman with a pen behind her ear listened to words that kept wanting to turn into a dream and then did not let them. She touched my mother's wrist. She called a doctor who walked with fast, gentle steps. They took blood, then fever, then time, and gave them back in the right order. We stayed 3 days. On the second night, I woke in the chair by the bed with my mother's hand in mine, and the smell of lilies in my hair. A leaflet had been slid under the door, a new hotel opening in the old quarter, sister to St. Denis, room starting at a rate that told the truth about what it cost to sleep. The letterhead was embossed with vines. When we returned for our luggage, the Hotel St. Denis had moved an inch to the left. The concierge was a woman in a gray suit and a pinched smile. The ledger had gone, or rather had never been, where anything could see it. The 5th floor ended at 5:10. The housekeeper was nowhere in the geography of the staff. Her name made the desk clerks blink as if I had mispronounced an ordinary word. And yet by the lobby door a cleaning trolley stood unattended for a moment. Dangling from its handle was a stripe of cloth tied into a small knot. I knew the knot. I untied it and found folded inside a photograph of a door with no number. In the top corner of the photo somebody had written 2 words in the tiny hand. A person who keeps lists to keep the world from coming apart. Be waiting. At dawn, 2 days later, as my mother slept without fever for the first time, and the church bells across the district tested the hour as if it might break, I walked back to the hotel and stood across the street. The windows were ordinary, the doors were obedient, but for the length of a breath, the 5th floor corner flared faintly and seemed flickered, where no scene could be. A girl passed me on the sidewalk no older than I had been in the mirror room. Eyes down, she stumbled, and I reached to steady her. Her hand was a bird's, hot quick. She glanced up for the smallest instant. Her pupils were not round but vertical like a cat's under a streetlight. Then they were human again, and she was only tired, and she said Mercy, and the city took her back. When we left Paris, my mother threw the herbal bottle from the hotel into the river from the footbridge by the flower market. The brown liquid made a bruise on the surface, and then was gone. I kept the ledger and the photograph and the knot, not as proof, for proof demands an audience, and I have none, but as weight, so that memory cannot drift. In airports and taxis, and nights when sleep is a trick I cannot perform, I feel sometimes the building move inside me, its staircases, its corridors of doors. On trains, tunnels breathe, in hospital rooms, radiators tick their old click. The world is full of places that keep. I have learned to count the seams. I have learned to wait at dawn. If I could, I would go back and open every door. I would bring a line of people like a chain and pass each person down hand to hand into the sunlight. I would take the concierge ledger and write release beside every thorn. But the hotel is older than my wanting. The city loves it the way cities love anything that wanders their losses into charming myths tourists can tell at dinner. Still, I keep watch when I travel. I ask for the quiet floor. I take a room with a number that can be divided by 3. I sleep with the drapes open, the seam of the wall is in sight. I pack a small sharp knife, and when I check in anywhere at all, I say my mother's name aloud the way a saint's name is said at the threshold of a chapel. Be waiting, the photo says in handwriting that looks like careful stitches. I am. Did you find that spine tingling? If you did, like and subscribe. Have a scary night and spooky nightmares.